For this meeting, asking that thou will just bind our hearts and our minds together, Lord, that we will work better for the betterment of the citizens of this great city. Thou will just continue, Lord, just to lead us and guide us and give us that mind that we might do the things that are right. These and all needs blessed, we ask in your Son's name. Amen.
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 Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is under council communications. It's a continuation of a conversation we had at our last council meeting about a proposed referendum on this November's ballot requested by Councilmember Waring. So I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of fact, I want to really single out, I don't want to mispronounce your last name, Mr. Halverson. I mean, she's done, and her legal team has done such a wonderful job, because this is a difficult question to try to frame. And the way she's communicated with us has been second to none. So I want to seriously thank you very much for your professionalism in all of this. I've had a lot of conversation with different council members on this one. And the question came to me, well, we had an amendment on the floor that would carve out some of the same things that we're asking. Carving out the existing homes. We agree 100%, I believe, on new construction. We agree 100% if a house is sustains or structure, a commercial building sustains substantial damage due to flooding. Where the difference would be if buildings or houses are damaged due to something other than flooding, substantially. Fire, wind, hail, tree damage. I even threw Formosan termites in there, and the reason I say that is I bought a house off foreclosure not too long ago, and I walked inside. You know, when you buy something off foreclosure, you can't look inside. You get to look outside. I walked inside, and man, did I grab an alligator by the tail. It was damaged substantially, almost substantially, by termites. We got there just in time. So I don't have to lift that house. I don't have to raise that house. What I'd like to do, maybe save a lot of effort. As a matter of fact, even I read the paper every now and then. Councilman White had actually said that we should, we need leadership on city council. So I'm gonna throw out to my colleagues to put the third reading of the ordinance. If you remember, I deferred it because, Mr. Mayor, we were gonna get the information from the National Flood Insurance Program to see whether we still can carve out the existing houses, as well as get the discount on the flood insurance that we all sought. I know that hadn't been determined, but you know what? Maybe we should go forward with the third reading, which would not necessitate even putting the referendum on. Put the third reading in front of council to pass Freeboard Plus One, accepting damages due to, I'm sorry, I said Freeboard Plus One? I'm sorry, Freeboard Plus Two, accepting damages, substantial damage due to anything other than flooding. Put that before council, kick it around, and whether we can get that on agenda and get a vote. So I throw that back to Mr. Mayor.
Motion. So moved.
That's right. That's why I say to put it on the agenda. I threw it to
put it on the agenda.
Second. Put it on the agenda. And then I believe, I just want to get straightforward vote.
No, we got to vote on that tonight.
9 votes.
9 votes is,
Because we with the audit, I'm going with the referendum.
But if it was the
Just a
third,
2/3 vote.
2/3 vote.
Wasn't that was the third, we don't need a vote to put it back on, to bring
Yeah,
it
the
back
vote
up?
to put it on the
Oh,
agenda.
to put it on, you want to put it on this agenda?
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay, add it to this agenda.
It's ordinance as it was sitting on the agenda, right?
As it was sitting, it was deferred on the agenda. Well, I'm sure we can get that. We got a lot of talented people in the room.
So if I could just make a comment before we vote to add it to the agenda, and I am going to very much support this. I had an opportunity to have a conversation with Councilmember Waring about this issue, particular to the referendum, and really what the discussion was about is the fact that it's a very complex and complicated issue. And quite candidly, if I wasn't on City Council, I'm not sure I would understand it. And so to be able to get the voters to the point where in a referendum, in a short period of time behind the curtain of a ballot box, to be able to understand that and understand it thoroughly enough that they make the right choice for themselves individually would be a monumental task. And so in that discussion, you know, and I shared with the Councilmember Waring that this is, I think, an opportunity where council is going to just have to simply take on the leadership role that we were placed in and do what we believe is the best thing and right for our community and move forward accordingly. And so given that, I'm 100% in support of that. And quite frankly, I think the way that we have established the amendments to the original ordinance so that it does in fact have some carve-outs for some of the issues specific to existing structures and being substantial damage over and above just flooding. I think, in my mind, that addresses maybe not all, because sometimes you have an unintended consequence here or there, but I'm guessing we solve about 95% of our problems, and in my opinion, if we get that close on legislation, we've got as good as we can get. So I'm very supportive of this. I'll certainly vote to add this to the agenda, and certainly support in moving this project forward, or this ordinance forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you.
And then Moody.
Please don't follow Councilmember White, but I 100% agree with you. I will definitely vote for it to be on the agenda. I do think that we need to take this responsibility under our own advisement. I shopped this ordinance draft around to my kids, even with some of the whereases to help them understand the background, and they were like, "Mom, why are we writing this now?" They're 30 and 40 something to have PhDs and masters. So that made me very concerned that we would be putting back something on our citizenry and expecting them to lead us in ways that I personally think that, you know, that's sort of a strategic mindset that we might need to get to as a council if we keep thinking about having these non-binding resolutions. But I totally agree with Councilmember White. I think this is the right thing to do. I'm personally, down the road, I'm going to be concerned about what our score will be, the CRS, that we're, you know, really brought this forward in the first place. In my head, we wanted to do this +2 change for 2 good reasons to match the county, so we're not confusing the citizens and the builders and the developer community who set their plans in motion based on these things. And also to try and lower the premiums for every flood insurance paying homeowner or property owner. So I'm still concerned with that. I think this is the place to start. If we get a ruling and we really need to debate that, we can always amend this to make some changes that would allow us to have that point score. But I thank you for agreeing that we should do this.
Mr. Mayor, I meant to, if I can make, oh, sorry, Peter.
Councilmember Moody is next.
Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to restate, be sure that I understood the original motion. The original motion was that we would adopt the freeboard +2 for new construction. We would also adopt that for any property that was destroyed more than 50% due to flooding would also have to meet that requirement. That all other risk would just be where you are. And in answering somewhat of what Ms. Jackson said about the 5%, and I think this is a deep subject and people don't understand it, but helping the confusion was, I read one article in our paper that said something about if we did this, we would get this 25% discount. And it kind of led you to believe that you would get a 25% discount. It didn't tell you you already had 20%. You were only going to get 5 more. So it was a little bit misleading there. But the other thing that I think we haven't considered, I haven't heard it discussed around here, is the cost of insuring all of those other perils, all of those other risks, the tornado, the termites, the earthquake, all of those. If we're going to force all of those to go up to freeboard +2, then somebody's got to pay for that insurance. And I don't think we're talking about that. So that cost, if we keep it like it is, that cost shouldn't go up. So maybe that will somewhat offset that 5%. I'm no insurance person, but I understand a little bit about risk, and if you're going to increase the cost of the risk, you're going to have to pay for it. So I think it works both ways. So I think this is the right way to go unless my understanding is different than somebody else's, that's what I would be voting on.
Councilmember Shade.
So I was not going to vote for this resolution to be passed, and so I'm glad we're going to shift gears a little bit. But I want to answer, I think, I heard a report, I mean, we've been batting this around for several months, so maybe I'm just getting my wires crossed on this, but I thought somebody from Stormwater Department advised us that if we pass the amendment, if we pass the +2, and we made an exclusion, that would deny us any benefit. And if I get somebody from Stormwater to answer that question, that would deny us any of the benefit from a premium, not say discount, but a premium benefit being lowered. So can you answer that for us?
Yes, Sterling's going to add a comment about the potential for first reading versus third reading on the agenda with major change. One of the issues we had with DNR was the firm that the agency we had corresponded with. DNR's concern was that if you separate the substantial damage, substantial improvement definitions from the new construction definition, FEMA gives all 3 of those under the new construction definition. So I think we talked more in depth with FEMA. We haven't gotten an official response yet, but from, again, informal responses, they think there's the ability for us to do that as long as we don't try to say that new construction and substantial improvement, substantial damage are different things under the FEMA definition of new construction. And I know that's getting incredibly complicated. Basically, FEMA says if you do substantial improvement, if you do substantial damage, that is new construction. So if you say we have one requirement for new construction, but a different requirement for substantial improvement, substantial damage, we just need to make sure that the ordinance reads in a way that those are not changing the FEMA definition. And I think we can do that, and FEMA says there's a good probability of doing that. It's just making sure we get that language in there properly.
And I think that's what I remember the report coming back from. And it's always about the 50% rule. So if it's greater than 50% improvement or 50% damage, repair from whatever occurrence, if you're making that distinction from either new construction or if you're making that distinction from something other than flood, then you're not getting the benefit. And I think that is what y'all reported, or someone reported to us several months ago.
So there are, I think, 2 separate questions there. And one question is, yes, if you separate the 2, you would not be eligible for the points from CRS. Second topic is, can you separate the definitions? Yes, FEMA will allow you to do different levels. We just have to make sure we phrase it in a way that doesn't look like it's in conflict with the way they define the terms. And it may be that that's not an issue. I mean, we haven't gotten an official response from FEMA yet. That was DNR's concern, was that FEMA would have an issue with that. We've been corresponding with FEMA about it. Haven't gotten our formal response back yet.
So from a procedural point of view, we're kind of discussing the question already. Can we just go ahead and vote on the motion to consider the third reading of the motion? Is there an issue there?
I'd
see the only issue is that obviously we will have to work out the language a bit more, and we might need to get some advice from FEMA or at least DNR on the exact language of our ordinance change. And so at this time, I don't think it would be appropriate to do third reading on the existing ordinance because it doesn't contemplate any of these changes. And these would be considered substantial changes, and so that's not something that we would want to do on third reading anyways. So I would suggest maybe having the discussion be on an ordinance, including Councilmember Waring's suggestions, and then asking the legal department to go ahead and work on that language for the next meeting, at which we would bring it back as a first reading. And it would be a totally separate ordinance than the one that is pending right now for third reading. And we can deal with them both at the same meeting at that time or something. We could withdraw or start over, again with a new one.
Going to let Councilmember Waring.
We could have, I have a question, Councilor. We could have voted on third reading a month ago. I deferred it. So what is new? I don't understand what you're alluding to. What is new in the ordinance that we're going to be voting on?
The carve-out part that you're suggesting, has that already been
That was
incorporated
part of the
into the
second
existing
reading.
ordinance?
That's part of the second reading. The first reading that the mayor put forth was for freeboard plus 2 across the board, for everything. My amendment carved out existing structures that obtain substantial damage from any other peril except flooding. Okay,
I
and we
apologize.
passed that.
I didn't work on the new revised version. I've
Okay.
only seen the original ordinance, so
Okay.
that's why I think I have some confusion. I had only seen the one, just the very first
But the
version.
second reading that passed was the amended version.
Okay.
And we should be able to pull that out. I mean, right.
Council.
That's what we voted on the second reading. And the mayor and our floodplain manager suggested writing to NFIP, and I said, okay, I'll defer it until we hear back from them. We heard back from them, and it's, quite frankly, it was nothing clear at all. So, so then we need to move forward. In other words, because the county has done this, that doesn't mean the county's right.
So,
Can we get a copy of the second reading so our council could be clear? We should be able to pull that up.
If we don't have it, that's what I
That's what I was asking a few minutes ago. Councilmember Griffin.
No, we didn't pass it.
I'm going to
Get it on the
ask you
agenda.
first if there's any more discussion about putting it on the agenda. Would you like to make a comment on that regard?
My point's more than that, so I'll wait.
All right. Would anyone else like to discuss the motion to add this to the agenda? That's if we can get a copy of it. Well, let's...
Well, so far we've received advice of our council that we shouldn't be doing this, so I think we probably need to clear that up.
Council didn't understand the second reading that passed.
I'm not sure.
If we can get a 5-minute adjournment so we can get a copy of the
Yeah.
second amendment? And then
Okay.
Well, can we have, if we're going to wait for 5 minutes, can we at least ask Mr. Fountain just a few questions about substance while we're waiting on this
Sure,
procedural
sure.
part? Let's use
do
our
this.
time wisely.
Let's have, call the question to put it on the agenda as amended, as was ready for third reading. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll allow staff.
I already did that.
It was already on the floor.
I made,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
moved for it. It doesn't matter.
It was made some time ago. It doesn't. Okay. So now, the motion, which is not on our agenda, and we've got to have somebody go pull up a copy of it or go get a copy of it, which we will do. In the meantime, we can continue to discuss it and ask Mr. Fountain or anybody else some questions. Councilmember Griffith, then Seeky.
So I've got a question, and then I want to make just a couple of comments. My question is, did we ever find out when our visit was going to be? Because originally, we wanted this done quickly because we thought the meeting was going to be this fall, and then we were told it was probably postponed to next year. Do we have a date yet on that?
So they don't provide a date at this point. They just say that you won't be in this year's cycle, it will be in next year's cycle. So it could be as early as January 1st, and it could be as late as...
But we've already heard that it's not going to be this year.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just going to make the comment that no matter what this ordinance says, whether we take it as amended, whether it's what it was tonight, I'm not voting for it. And the reason why is because we've had so much discussion about this, we've beat our heads over it for so long. I don't think that the benefit outweighs the cost at this point. We have so many more questions than we have answered. This was not brought up by a council member to be put on an agenda. This was to maybe get us to an extra 5% at the next meeting, at the next visit. Well, we can get that 5% through other ways as well, and I still haven't seen all of the information about, I know we had a slideshow about potentially getting other points, but there's plenty of other ways to get points other than this one way. Your point about the county and the city, just because the county did it, I completely agree with, because look at the density in the city compared to the county. Look at how many homes are in the city. We are the largest municipality in the state. We're really the largest, the city of Charleston is so much larger than the county in terms of the number of houses. We can't be making decisions based on what other people are doing. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So that point to me doesn't make sense. I think we stay at FEMA +1 for the time being. That's my perspective, and I didn't want people to think I voted no because it's as amended. It's because I think we should stay right where we are. We don't have all the information to make the decision, and at this point, I have not seen any proof that the benefit is going to outweigh the cost to the taxpayers of Charleston, the people every day that this would affect, especially the people that are built on slabs. It's going to be detrimental to them. That extra foot, I can't imagine somebody who goes out and has to live paycheck to paycheck like everyday Charlestonians, and then they're told that they've got to come up with an extra $2,500. That's a lot of money to an everyday person. It might not be to some, but to an everyday person it is. So I'm voting no. Thank you.
Councilmember Seekings.
I just want to ask Mr. Fountain, I think I heard him correctly when he said that under the current FEMA guidelines and where we're heading, they view anything more than 50% the same as new construction. So a carve-out is problematic. Is that basically what you just told us?
The concern in DNR has raised, as the agency that oversees the FEMA program implementation at the state level, is that there may be conflict between the language we have, not the intent. The intent, they think there may be a way to make that work. It's the differentiation of definition and language.
And we're not going to resolve that tonight, right?
It would be challenging.
Right, and just one other quick follow-up, because we talked about this before, and it's just been a while since we did. The way we're going to set this up is there are certain properties, particularly in the old and historic district, that will not be exempt, that they will be able to apply to the BZA for a variance. Is that correct?
So there is not an exemption. It is a variance process. In terms of the exact process, if you don't mind, Mr. Joel,
I just want to
the
make
exact
sure,
process for
is that a BZA matter, or who is that? Is that you?
It's not me. The variance request would go to the Board of Appeals under the building code. There is documentation from our Board of Architectural Review staff and the State Historic Preservation Office. Once we get that documentation from those two groups, the variance is heard by the Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals for?
Building code.
Who is that?
Me.
I know that, but we don't see it very often.
So Mr. James Metters is the chair of that board.
Didn't we just put him on the planning commission?
He's on the VAR now.
A VAR? All right.
Well, then I'm not sure that if they've chosen a new chair then yet, but he has been.
And I don't want to usurp everybody's time, but one of the things I worried about, and I still worry about, is the conflict between people asking for a variance, trying to get to a certain height to meet freeboard +2 in an area that's super low, where they may have to go up 5 feet to get freeboard +2 because they're currently -3, and then they butt up against some pretty tough zoning ordinances. So then you're going to have to go get a second variance that is a Board of Zoning Appeals issue. So you may be before two boards. That gets complicated.
Councilmember White.
One of the things I would suggest is recognizing that there may be some period of time that's going to pass before we actually know what that language needs to look like in order to not be in conflict with FEMA. And as I heard correctly, the intent is fine. It's the language that requires some tweaking. And as it stands currently today, if we were to pass this now and we find out 6-8 months from now that we need to tweak this language in order to maintain the appropriate credits and discounts that we currently enjoy, I don't think anybody in this room is going to deny that opportunity. But what it does do for us today, and really this is for our citizens who may be on the lower end of the income spectrum, is that today they're not protected. They're not protected at all. And there's a lot of homes that would be impacted substantially as it currently exists if they have an issue that's non-flood related. So the one thing that we do by passing this right now is we ensure that those people who are in the lower income spectrum, who are at risk today and don't really even probably know how much risk they're in, we fix that. That opportunity and obligation is upon us, and that's what we really need to be focused on, is that the opportunity for us to fix a problem with the ordinance as it exists today can be done, and we can do it right now. And Councilmember Griffin, I certainly understand the issues that you raised, but I would say that by doing and making these carve-outs part of the ordinance as it moves forward, we will in fact protect those folks who are in low income spectrum who are at risk. And I think it is certainly incumbent upon us to do that if we can do it, and certainly we can. So, thank you.
Mr. Fountain.
Just as a very brief clarification, the concern DNR raised was not towards the discounts, which is the CRS program, it was towards coverage under the NFIP. So they would potentially put you in a punitive state under the NFIP program.
So if I may ask a question of Mr. Fountain. The carve-outs we're discussing are not to change the definition of construction, but to exclude other perils, a fire, an earthquake, or some other peril from basically forcing someone to go to +2, even if they're in the flood zone, special flood zone, if it's another peril. So my question is this: if we were to do that, is there any jeopardy for our existing CRS points and our existing 20% discount that we currently enjoy?
As long as the ordinance retains the existing base freeboard elevation +1, those points stay in place with the existing CRS score to get us a 20% discount. It would only be if we were to do anything that altered our existing ordinance with that 1 foot of freeboard above base flood elevation.
So if we subtract it.
Right. If you were to say that the carve out took it all the way back to base flood elevation, that would remove the existing points. As long as you only do more protection for new construction, it wouldn't impact the existing points.
Okay.
We just need to make sure the language is appropriate, but it's the method of doing that FEMA has indicated informally is approvable.
Right. So could I respectfully ask council to consider that as we pass this, that maybe we have a little caveat that based upon what Mr. Fountain just said, that we refine the language to ensure that we don't risk what we already got.
That's right.
Is that fair enough way of saying that?
Council for approval, right?
Sir?
You're not contemplating that we just sort of give, I mean, that ordinance change in language, we still have to come back for additional approval once we know what that looks like. If language changes are required.
I believe so. Mr. Shealy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm confused a little bit because if we change this ordinance to where the existing ordinance now, if we take the other perils out of there, are we not changing the original ordinance? And does that not, I mean, does it put us in any jeopardy because we're taking those perils away?
So as long as you only remove the additional perils, for better use of a term, from the additional foot of elevation, then you're okay on the existing. As long as those perils still are required to go to base flood elevation plus one, as in the current ordinance, that current ordinance, then you still retain the points for that work. It would only be if you extended that carve out and said we're going to take those back to base flood elevation that you would lose the points gained from that activity.
Gotcha.
So this is basically the addition of more restriction for new construction or homes damaged by flooding would just be more protective, so there wouldn't be a reduction in points for that.
Thank you. Yeah, got it.
Mr. Shade. So if I understand what you're mentioning, or what you just stated to us, we're creating two different classes.
Right.
You're creating a class of +1, and regardless of the nature of the damage or the nature of the improvement, that's going to stay the same. Then we're creating a second class that's going to have +2, only applying to new construction and only applying to any damage outside of, only applying to damage only that requires it from a flood. Any other type of damage based upon an improvement or based upon damage from a hurricane or tornado or a tree falling through is not going to apply. So you've created a little bit more of a confusion with all of this by having two different classes.
And we don't have an ordinance like that right now.
I know. Let me just rephrase this so I make sure everybody's clear on this. And to Councilman Griffin's point, if we do nothing and we don't pass +2, we're at +1. And at +1, regardless of the nature of the damage or regardless of the improvement, you've got to build your house or fix that, move that house up to a standard, to FEMA standards +1 foot. Okay, and then whatever benefits we get out of that, we keep. If we carve out and say we're going to go to +2, and you are +2 except for some damage created by a hurricane or a tree falling through whatever, then you've got to maintain the +1 of the damage no matter how it happened, or the improvement no matter how it happened. So you're creating two, yes you are, you're creating two, that's what he just said. He's creating two classes.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
When we pass a new ordinance, why does the old ordinance still apply?
Because that's what he's trying to explain to us. We've got to maintain the benefits, of what happens to your home. You've got to maintain that no matter what happened, what caused the damage, that you keep it at the current level that we are right now. So that's what I heard him say. And if I'm wrong with that, correct me.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, correct. If you were to eliminate any component of the existing FEMA base flood elevation +1 component, it would remove the points from the CRS system for that existing ordinance.
We're better off doing nothing. Let me finish. We're better off doing nothing as opposed to creating a carve-up to go to +2.
Under FEMA +1, regardless of the peril, okay, you still have to go up. Am I correct?
I'm saying under our existing ordinance, yes, any new construction, substantial improvement, substantial damage,
correct,
base flood elevation +1 foot.
Now, if we go to +2, okay, does that remove from the existing +1 and just include under +1 new construction? So I think that's the question.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time just to make sure I'm clear?
I think that's what you're saying. Right. I mean, if I'm hearing you, okay, if we go to FEMA +2, all right, we'll do the separation that is just new construction. okay? That has to be FEMA +2, okay? If there is a peril, okay, the plus, if I'm understanding it correct, the +1 at 50% or more damage is still in effect.
That's my understanding of how it's currently being proposed.
Right, okay, and that's different, right, but I'm just saying, but that's different from what I'm hearing from Councilman Waring's recommendation. If I'm hearing it, even +1, it's gone, okay? Regardless of, as long as it's not flood peril, okay? They don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be done. I guess I'm.
So that is certain. Those are certainly two different ways to consider an ordinance to be written, and that, yes, they are separate.
Correct.
Separate styles of ordinance.
Okay, but if I'm hearing the recommendation from Councilman Waring is if we go +2, then only if it's flood damage. Am I correct so far? Only if it's flood damage do we have to go up to the FEMA +2, based on new construction only. That means, so I'm clear, that means if there is any peril, okay, other than flooding, you don't have to go up to 50 +2.
But you still have to go to +1.
That's what I'm trying to make clear here, okay?
Because otherwise, we'd lose our points, everybody would lose their 20% discount.
That's what I'm understanding, okay? But that's not quite what I thought.
That's not quite really what you wanted.
I want to be clear before we, right. Okay, that's very different from what, yes.
It's different. I would respectfully say that we need to keep the 20% insurance discount in place. I mean, I understand we're trying to protect those who might have another peril to protect them from having to raise their home, and there's certain dollars exposure there, but the immediate exposure, people to lose their discount on the existing, what we got right now, would be immediate.
Make sure we all understand.
So maybe it's better, as Councilmember Griffin said, to do nothing. But before I finish my remarks, let me just say the original purpose of all this is not just to get on the same boat with the county, who's already at +2 and doesn't have any of these exclusions. The real purpose is just to protect our property long-term from flooding. The higher we build, the better off we're going to be with increased extreme weather, rain bombs, and sea level rise. So if you're building something new today and you expect your house to last 40 or 50 years, we're expecting a 2 to 3 foot level, 2 to 3 foot rise in sea level during that time frame. So why not go ahead and put the spec in place to where the new home built next week will be protected 40 years from now, you know? So that's the underlying real reason that I had proposed that we consider doing the same as the county. It's just a matter of flood protection. And so Councilmember Waring had his hand up.
Mr. Mayor, the discussion, the difference really isn't on new construction. Everything you spoke about just now was new construction. I think 100% of us agree on new construction. Certainly an overwhelming majority of us agree on new construction.
Right.
But we have a ton of homes. And, you know, I've certainly called out low to moderate income people because I have a lot of that in my district. But virtually everybody that has a house on a slab that's been built since FEMA Plus One went into being in the city of Charleston. Almost everybody would fall into this risk.
Trap, if we've
I'm talking, it's really the existing homes that we're talking about. And the part that, frankly, I find hard to grasp, Mr. Fountain, is that this proposal doesn't cost the National Flood Insurance Program one penny. Not one penny. Because if you have damage from another peril, again, fire, wind, tree damage, earthquake, the National Flood Insurance doesn't pay a penny of that claim. Not one penny of that claim. So it doesn't expose them to any additional financial risk at all. That's why, Mr. Mayor, and I brought it up, and I know you think it's a jab at you, but I agree with you. When we spoke about, and this is what Councilman Griffin was talking about, keeping it at FEMA Plus One, you said they're already in that trap.
That's right.
And I agree. Listen, this is not a jab at the mayor. These homeowners are already in the trap, in that risk, and we put them there, not FEMA. City Council, and I voted for that, but we never had this discussion back in 2014 when we went to FEMA Plus One, okay? We put them in that trap. They were not in that trap when we were at FEMA. At FEMA. We only concentrated, believe me, I will finish in a second, Mr. Jackson, okay? We only talked about flooding. And here we are 5 years later talking about flooding. And we talking about, and I say this respectfully, I thought about what Councilman Seeking said at the last meeting. He said, you know what, we make decisions all the time about people's in their homes. But we don't make decisions that could subsequently displace communities. And it is not if we have another storm, it's when we have another major storm hit Charleston. Many of the people who were able to repair their homes in place after Hugo, under the FEMA Plus Two, would not have been able to do that. And when I asked Mr. Joker at the last Public Works meeting, what does the city use as a standard to determine 50% damage or more, he said the county assessed value. Everybody in this room knows the county assessed value is a low value. And I'd also asked him, do they subtract out the land value? He said yes. Well, by the time you subtract out, Mr. Mayor, you told me that the land, that the house that you were in is worth more than your home, than the actual structure, the dwelling. So if they subtracted out the value of the land, that means, frankly, it's economic discrimination. You will be able, the claim will be able to hit that 50% threshold faster in the moderate income areas than certainly an area on, at the Battery, frankly. If you have a multi-million-dollar home, if you've got a $4 million home, you're going to have damages in the millions to be able to hit substantial damage. But if you have a $150,000 house and $50,000 of that is land, and the reason that's not out the line, I actually had MLS do a search from the Ashley River bridges to the Walpole Bridge to the North Bridge, all the way to Mark Clark Expressway for vacant lots 50,000 or less. One of them popped up. One lot for 50,000 or less. So if you subtract 50,000 from a house that is assessed at 150,000, if you sustain damage of $51,000 or $50,001, you at substantial damage. You're going to have to lift that home. And the numbers that have been put out to the public, now the newspaper has done a better job recently, but they took your talking points, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Joker. They came up with that $1,000 to $2,400 to lift a house 1 foot. Now, in subsequent articles, they've said going up to as much as $100,000. But when it is a peril, frankly, that we on the 2014 council put thousands of homeowners in. And to say that we're going to do nothing to help take them out for a 5% discount, maybe on the flood insurance, and nobody has calculated, if you increase the building costs, homeowners insurance will go up. And you know that. Homeowners insurance will go up. Yeah, you may get a discount on the flood, but If you're covering more perils, more risks, the insurer has to get the money from someplace, and you get that from premiums. So I throw that out for extra consideration. As a matter of fact, you got people around, virtually everybody on this council is in that category. I mean, maybe one, you in that category too, because you're not FEMA Plus 2. Everybody around this council would be subject to having to potentially raise their home if they had substantial damage from another peril. So the easiest thing to do is not fix the problem, because the people didn't understand what we did to them in 2014, because we didn't have the extended conversation about what if something happens other than flooding. Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson hadn't been spoken yet on this matter, and I'll come back for second.
I think we had such a good comprehensive presentation from Mr. Jolka a few months ago, and you know, I wish I could remember most of the details, but what we're not talking about are the homes that, the majority of the homes in our city are insured. We have property casualty coverage, so if you have a peril that's not flood related and you have to, you know, replace your house from a fire, the insurance company is going to require you to go to the flood zone height, and they will cover it. It's a replacement cost. Now, maybe some people don't have replacement costs for their insurance. Maybe some people are, you know, not choosing to pay that premium. But what we're talking about now, if we decided to change the +1 ordinance and separate out the other perils, everyone who buys flood insurance, you know, as responsible stewards in the whole city would lose their 20%. So now we're not talking about just not, you know, taking on giving people the 5%. We're talking about going backward and putting more people at risk. I know that Mr. Jolka had found us statistics about how many people, you know, that were eligible for flood insurance in a special flood hazard area zone were not covered. And it's a small percentage. So we can't take away the people's opportunity to pay for their flood insurance and get the discount that our community has put the points together to give them today. I'm happy to just, you know, table this again and not do anything right now with the +2, but please don't talk about changing the +1 and taking out the other perils, because people have homeowner coverage. And if they have another peril that takes out their house, their insurance company is going to make them build to the FEMA code that they're in. That's the way the building industry is right now. So we're not giving them any benefit. If they're on a slab, they lose their house, they really should be 4 feet off the ground. Their new house is going to be 4 feet off the ground.
Councilmember Griffin.
I believe it was the great poet Winnie the Pooh that once said, every once in a while, the best something is to do nothing. Now, I agree with you, to do nothing in the sense of this entire topic is the wrong thing to do. But to make a decision tonight, I'm not saying we should defer it. I'm saying we should table it all together for now. We've got 4 months at least until they come visit, and we need to see some numbers. I want to sit down and look at a value of a home and actually go through some math about how much we're saving at 20%, what we would save if we took some things back from +1. We would still get a discount. It may not be 20%, but I believe there's a 15% discount instead of a 20. We need to look at that. We need to look at what we're at now. We need to look at what would happen if we went to +2 and actually see some hardcore numbers based on the values of homes in Charleston. Because I would hate to make any decision that could, I keep saying cost to benefit. We talk about all of the people that aren't insured properly. We talk about all of the people that would have a substantial damage claim or would have to raise their home. I'd love to talk to somebody who actually does that for a living and what they charge. We don't have those kind of numbers, and we're not going to get them tonight. but we certainly can get them within the next month or two, and we can certainly start this dialogue over and maybe ask the right questions, because I think we were asking a lot of the wrong questions when we started out. I think that we were doing it for the wrong reasons when we started out. But now I think everybody knows the risks involved in this. But maybe we need to have a workshop with some people from the community that do this sort of thing to actually talk some numbers, because I want to see whether or not we're actually saving people money by going up. You know, we say that we're doing it, well, sea level rise, I get that. But the whole premise of this, when this whole thing started, was, hey, we've got a meeting here and we want to get to 25%, and these are easy points. It was not your idea of, hey, sea level rise and we're going to do this and do that. That was not what the reason was when we were approached in the beginning of this. So I think we had the wrong idea when we first started out. We were looking for an easy way to get up 5%. But 5% compared to what the alternatives are and what insurances you could be lacking, that could be a detrimental thing to not only one person, but to an entire family, an entire lineage of people. They could lose their home forever. Somebody who's been in a home for 100 years, but doesn't live downtown. They could lose their home forever because they're never going to get a variance. Their chances of that is zero. Never been one in the city west of the Ashley, and I don't see one coming. So we've got to do a better job getting all of the facts and crunching some actual numbers. We had that insurance guy come one time, but I wasn't totally sold on that. I really wasn't. He said the right things, but why would I value his opinion over my comrade on council who's been a insurance agent for years and years, and he's got some things he's worried about, and I got to trust him on that. We've got some serious issues here, and we don't need to be doing this for the points.
Mr. Wagner has not been heard yet. Mr. Wagner.
About forgot what I was going to say. Y'all are killing me here. No, actually, Matt's trying to pull from his memory an awful lot of stuff. And Harry, I think, is actually right. When this first hit Public Works and Utilities, which Keith and Harry and I are all on with you, sir, and Peter. But when it first hit, I probably was the most vocal the first day on saying, I don't want to go to +2 anyway. And I mean, I was afraid my neighbor was going to build up here and I was going to get flooded. I mean, let's go back to what a very simple picture of what I'm trying to tell you here by doing that. This thing definitely says, unless substantial improvements are results of an event other than flooding, and therefore are exempt from the increase of elevation from 1 foot to 2 foot. That's what we've got. That's on the second reading. My question is, are you 200% sure that your recitation of the points and all of this good stuff, and who's the culprit here? Why are we doing this? It's not FEMA. Who is it? Is it somebody else? Is it, who is requiring this other than FEMA? Who's going to take away our points? Who's going to cancel our insurance? What's going to happen out here? And, what's the citation? How about that?
So DNR is the state agency that is in charge of implementing the National Flood Insurance Program at the state level. It's a delegated authority from the federal government. DNR has sent a formal letter saying they have concerns that FEMA would potentially challenge the ordinance language. That is the only thing we have at this point. There's no certainty or guarantee. It is not a letter from FEMA. That's why we've been reaching out to FEMA trying to get confirmation. I believe from what we've talked with FEMA about, there is an approach where you could do it. It's just that new construction definition.
How close to getting a response? When did we ask FEMA, and what kind of response are we looking for, and when?
So we've asked FEMA a couple of months ago. FEMA tends to prefer that you send them recommended language, and that's where we've kind of come back. At that point, of course, we tabled this discussion for the referendum discussion, and we haven't advanced the other discussion because we've been working on the referendum discussion at this point. I wasn't aware we were going to bring this back up, or else we would have continued that approach.
I'm gonna send you my wife, because she'll ride them guys like Seabiscuit till she gets an answer.
And we have gotten good informal response in saying, here's guidance and here's how you may be able to do it. It just hasn't been a formal approval letter at this point.
Yeah, I'm quite sure she's watching, and I'm in a whole lot of trouble.
Mr. Gregory.
That's the truest statement you made tonight, sir. Can I ask the attorney something real quick about this draft? Because as I read it, okay, it eliminates the 1 fee. No. How I read it. Now, you may read it differently, okay? It eliminates the 1 feet. 1 feet is not mentioned anywhere in here, okay? So
1 foot.
1 foot rather. Right. 1 foot. So the way I'm reading this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that distinction that we just kind of explained, okay? That's it. For the 1 foot, any peril will require X, Y, Z. Those distinctions aren't in here, and I think that Councilman Waring is correct, that if we were to pass this as is, there is no distinction. It's 2 feet. Am I correct?
There is a sentence that says that the increase from 1 foot to 2 feet applies only to structures damaged as a result of flooding, but I don't see where we actually preserved the 1 foot in the paragraph above it. So I haven't had a chance to really look at this draft. This is the first time I'm really looking at it too, so we may need to do some more work on it.
Right, because everywhere there's 1 foot, it's changed to 2 feet.
Well, in section 4, little letter I, little number I, it says in bold print, underline, unless a substantial improvement to the existing manufactured home is the result of an event other than flooding and therefore is exempt from the increase of elevation from 1 to 2 feet. So it's preserving the 1 foot in that case.
Manufactured home.
Right. And then the next one down, Section 5 does the same thing for other homes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how it maintains the 1 foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so.
No?
I don't read it quite that way.
Basically, this is a replacement to FEMA +1.
Right, exactly.
Everything is stricken from the record
Right.
and goes to 2 feet, and it adds the exemptions.
Right. That's how I read it.
The existing ordinance of FEMA +1 is replaced 100%. This FEMA +2.
Right.
Can we defer this until the next meeting?
I'm just saying
Can we
this
defer
doesn't
until
get...
the August 20th meeting? There was a motion on the floor to defer.
You know what?
So they could work on it, maybe we all work.
I don't have any trouble doing that. The thing about it,
Yeah, I don't read it that way.
we need to do something for legal staff because they did so much work on this to get it in for the day. But beyond that, I don't have any problem deferring it because hopefully we're going to come back and finish it.
Right.
I deferred it to get letters from the DNR and the National Flood Insurance Program, but that has not really materialized. This should be decided on prior to the next election, okay? And with all due deference, we talk about insurance discounts. We're in the middle of hurricane season right now. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Hugo. What's that, September 22nd? 30 years since we had a direct hit, and that wasn't quite a direct hit. If a hurricane were to hit right now, these people that are in jeopardy that we talked about could not repair their houses in place as they did 30 years ago. They could not do it, okay? And what you're going to see, I brought up the example about Ansonborough. Ansonborough was flooded during Hugo. Supposedly it was contamination.
Let's not go there, let's leave that one alone.
Well,
I don't want to dwell on that.
My point is...
I agree with your words, supposedly.
Right. My point is, that could happen to a larger sector of the community now. That community was displaced, okay? And a different plan put in place. We can go out and enjoy the plan right now. We walk around Gatzenbauer Park, the condos, et cetera. That could happen to South Pine Point, Ardmore. That could happen to Burns Down. That could happen to the Moreland area. That could happen to South Windermere.
Gatson Green.
It could happen to Gatson Green. And we're going to do nothing about it. So if we're going to go back and we're going to put it on the agenda and we're going to finish it, and if this is so detrimental and FEMA were to come back and say, no way, no how, we're going to take the insurance program from Charleston entirely, you know what? We would act. We would act. Right now, kicking the can down the road, that's not acting. So I'll defer it to the August meeting. I thank staff for putting all this, because I think we could have put that on the referendum. And the whole purpose was to elevate the level of this conversation for more people in the city of Charleston, because they need to know what's happening to their homes. And I'll tell you one other thing that I need to bring up, and I spoke to council about yesterday, briefly. Tuesday, we had a meeting at CPW. And believe it or not, they brought this up as, do you realize if we have a major hurricane and CPW gets swamped, then they're going to have to come into new building requirements. So that means while we're trying to get our essential services back up, our building permit department's not going to give them a permit to get the water and sewer back online. And that's a highly capitalized business. You all may remember, we just approved, I think, $129 million in refinancing. I think it was it Mr. Joker, council lady, that we spoke to? Or was it floodplain manager that said, we're going to hold them to a higher standard? Well, if you're trying to get essential services back up, we've been here doing Hugo. What happens? The fleet of utility trucks come in from other neighbors and states trying to help us. The military came in, and we were glad to see them. Can you imagine if our water and sewer services had to go through and apply for building permits and approvals through OCRM and DHEC before we get sewer services online? What was told to me is that things will begin to back up. Our system wouldn't be equipped to handle it. Sewage would begin to back up in homes, restaurants, hotels, bars. We have not thought this through. So there's more to think about, and you're right, more people would be in that vice and that peril that we all now know more about than we did when it was first brought to us. So let's defer it to the August meeting, but we got homework to do.
Councilman, is that a motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm moving.
Second. Third.
Councilmember Shea.
What I'd like to do is, if we could pull this off between then, I know we have the 15th as another meeting, but it would help us all if we could put together between now and the 20th a workshop, and bring in the insurance people, bring in FEMA folks, to talk about this. We've got this thing around. We may not get the answer back that we're looking for between now and the 20th.
I don't have that kind of.
We have a motion on the floor to defer.
I agree with deferral, but I think that if we're really going to make this the quality session that we need to have and get to the bottom of everyone's questions and answers, why don't we put it off till September? We know that the CRS people are not coming until the spring, isn't that
Next year
earliest?
sometime,
Yeah.
we don't know when.
So I think we need to stop piecemealing this. And Councilmember Waring, I know I'm a thorn in your side about all of this. What bothers me in our discussion is that we have the base elevation no matter what. If any houses, if Ansonboro was, washed over and needed to be reclaimed again, they would start at the base elevation. And so we can't get rid of that. That's a federal, zoning requirement. But But at this point then, we're just talking about 2 extra feet. I mean, that's what I can't get my mind around. So that's where I need to really, how one is totally devastating.
Councilmember Griffin.
Just to make it abundantly clear and obvious, every extra foot costs thousands of dollars. Thousands. And people don't have that kind of money sitting around. No, they won't always pay.
All right, all in favor of deferring, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. No. So that's the added item to our agenda. We now have the resolution regarding the referendum. Can I entertain a motion to withdraw? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We had our committee chairman of the audit committee is left, but I would suggest that the same report that he gave at Ways and Means Committee stands. Is that acceptable? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Next, Committee on Ways and Means.
Move for. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Would we entertain having a workshop meeting on this issue?
Mr. Mayor, I was looking at it, but I said, coming up with this month here,
Yeah.
even next month, trying to get any more meetings crammed into what we're doing now,
Yeah.
I got too many meetings going on now. I know I wouldn't be able, it's going to be up and down with me with meetings. I got meetings all throughout August already.
We'll poll you for
Yeah, that's the
a
best
time
thing to
that
do.
will work for everybody. How about that? Okay, the next regular meeting of City Council will be Tuesday, August 20. There's no further business. We hereby stand adjourned. Thank you.